20 weirdest courtroom moments of all time. A courtroom is no place for surprise, but Franecha Torres had to learn that the hard way. After being involved in the murder of William Touchet alongside two other accomplices, justice was being served in court when all of a sudden, Torres forgot that she was an accomplice to murder and gave the best acting shocked performance since kids when their mum tells them something got broken in the kitchen.
Those are the charges that are pending right now.
Still, nothing is more surprising than when a judge loses it in court. Just ask Judge John Murphy. John Murphy may be a powerful judge, but it seems like attorneys can really get on his nerves, such as what happened with public defender Andrew Weinstock, who refused to waive his right for the client in an assault charge, when all of a sudden, Judge Murphy literally asks him to square up.
If you want to fight, let's go out back and I'll just beat.
And to everyone's shock, they settle their difference Old West style outside the courtroom. You can even hear Judge Murphy win the fight outside. What a Renaissance man. Judge Murphy isn't the only judge who's ready to get down to business, as Judge R.W. Buzzard can give him a run for his money when it comes to fitness. Judge R.W. Buzzard seems like he's in a Batman crime-fighting situation, as when two defendants, Tanner Jacobson and Cody Howard, made a run for it in court, he didn't hesitate to throw his robe off like it was a cape and take after them like a bat out of hell, chasing them all the way down the stairs before tackling one of them to the ground. They don't teach you that in law school. Some criminals, on the other hand, take the whole laughing in the face of death pretty seriously, such as with Luis Bracamontes, was on trial for killing Sheriff Deputy Danny Oliver, but he seemed to relish in the horrific act he had done, as he kept smiling, laughing, and looking up at the sky in court. Not sure what he was looking at, but it sure didn't look like he was praying. Whether or not he was mocking or laughing out of stress, it was the death penalty recommendation that seemed to really tickle Bracamontes. Does the electric chair vibrate that hard? Other than Bracamontes, some defendants really didn't get the whole respect the court memo, like Marlena Pavlos Hackney. Pavlos Hackney was a restaurant owner on trial for violating COVID-19 laws in Michigan, but when she suspiciously refused to take an oath in court, the judge used the restaurant business against her, telling her,
"I know you want to control this room, but this isn't Burger King."
Maybe she's more of a Wendy's fan. The judge even made a joke, using the "Have It Your Way" slogan.
When the sign changes to Burger King, you can have it your way. Right now, this is my courtroom.
These judges are honestly funnier than most of us would tend to believe, but some take their sarcasm a bit far, like the next judge, who couldn't help but argue with the prosecutor. When an argument over another prosecutor, whom the judge had apparently changed the date of appearance, erupted, the prosecutor present kept objecting, and the judge would not have it.
Okay, your objection's noted.
We had a phone status conference 2 weeks ago in which Ms. Schiff will...
Your objection is noted.
Until the prosecutor had enough and seemed to really dislike how the judge was being condescending. So, he does the one thing that might get on the judge's nerves and just storms off. Seems like he just reconsidered all that time in law school in those 30 seconds. Now, while some choose to leave the courtroom on their own, some are simply kicked out, like Alan McCarty. Alan McCarty gets our vote for the dumbest criminal alive after he rang a courtroom threatening a judge to come outside. Instead of coming outside, they brought McCarty inside for a trial.
Suck my d***! No. I'm not standing. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. I'm just not standing. Stand up. I'm not standing. I don't have to stand.
But it only got worse from there. Acting like a comedy movie character that has zero self-awareness, McCarty kept yelling, shouting out racial slurs, cussing, and refusing to move when they tried to take him outside. Even when he got kicked out, he could still be heard throwing a tantrum outside the courtroom. How the judge held himself in from laughing should be an entire law school course right there.
Shit, you stupid mother. Yeah, keep looking at me, boy.
But nonetheless, and additionally, because I know you can hear me in the back room.
The one person who really should have taken a law school course, though, is Dale Lester Morris, who seems to have zero idea how the law works. When Dale Lester Morris was on trial for robbing a bank, he made a big breakthrough by admitting he did steal the money. But that it was somehow not illegal. In a debate that made heads roll, Lester Morris showed off his impressive and complete lack of any constitutional knowledge as he kept filibustering and literally speaking nonsense about rights and what's legal, to the point where he made Judge J. Cedric Simpson laugh.
I'm talking about the enactment clause under our Constitution. Okay. Michigan Constitution, 1963, Article 4, subsection 23. You know this. Mr. Rory. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting high strong.
The look on the judge's face was pure comedy, rethinking his years-long career in law. Morris's nonsensical ideas would kill on something like Twitter, though. Speaking of the law, serial killer Danny Rolling missed the fact that singing isn't really viable under oath. Danny Rolling, aka the Gainesville Ripper, is an example of a truly horrible human being with the blood of 5 students on his hands. But just like his twisted mind, it seems like he also had a twisted sense of humor, as he got up to start singing in court when asked to make a statement.
I recall the day I first saw you. I reached out to say I love you.
In any normal context, it's a beautiful song, but when it's sung by an insane serial killer, it becomes instantly creepy. It's mind-boggling how it made one woman smile in court, though. Not all judges are this agreeable, though, as some, like Judge Pinky Carr, probably deserve as much punishment as the ones they dish out. During the peak of COVID-19 lockdown, all courts were instructed to close except for extreme cases. Judge Pinky Carr, however, had little regard for human life and argued against it, painting herself as a hero who would show up to work no matter what.
I'm here. If people show up, I'm here.
She brutally gave out arrest warrants for defendants for not showing up, even though they literally were not supposed to. What made things worse is how Judge Carr kept arguing with the prosecution, acting extremely condescending. It seems like singing is a common tic for an absolute psychopath, as David Rolling was joined in the criminal orchestra by Brian David Mitchell. After kidnapping Elizabeth Smart and holding her hostage for 9 months, Brian David Mitchell was finally caught and interrogated. But this creepy criminal decides to become even creepier by suddenly breaking out into song in the middle of his interrogation. Apparently, Elizabeth Smart described him as very annoying during her 9-month stay, and we can't blame her.
The time is far spent, there is little remaining to publish glad tidings by sea and by land. Then hasten ye heralds, go forward proclaiming. At least Mitchell was smart enough not to try to defend himself in court. Unlike Jeremy Shaw, after a list of charges long enough for what could be a 10-hour trial, such as home invasion, car theft, identity theft, and possession, Jeremy Shaw thought his defense attorney wasn't good enough, and that he could do a better job.
But that's fine, you don't have to buy my opinion, but he is a lawyer and you're not.
I'm a better lawyer than you.
Yeah, it's your opinion as well.
After his attorney complained in court, Shaw proceeded to argue with the judge to defend himself, but when the judge kept reminding him that it's a bad idea, he goes ahead and does this. While Shaw wanted to take his chance in court, other criminals simply give up to extreme degrees, like Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham. After a horrific murder charge of a 3-year-old, Erica and Shanita were shocked to learn that murder lands you in prison, as the judge gave them both a life sentence.
The court finds it appropriate that each be sentenced to the State Department of Corrections for a period of life.
All of a sudden, though, either they regretted what they did, or they realized that their actions have ruined their lives, as they broke down and started screaming in court, even hiding under the table. While their screams of agony were probably annoying to everyone in court, to a victim's family member, they were probably a sweet serenade of revenge. Now, while the judge was probably right in this case, other judges like James Covery really put their foot in their mouths. In a divorce case where the husband couldn't get his Social Security earnings, Judge James Covery became suspicious and tried to play detective. But he failed miserably when attorney Yvette Ramos Alvarez, a former member of the Hispanic Bar Association, proved him wrong by saying that she hadn't received her Social Security earnings in 4 years. The judge's response? Full-blown racism.
Well, when did you become an illegal alien?
No wonder she walked out of the courtroom and left him embarrassed. Speaking of embarrassment, nothing is more embarrassing than finding out your name during a Zoom trial is Butt Effer 3000. But Nathaniel Saxton got the shock of a lifetime when the judge noticed the inappropriate name on his screen. Saxton was on trial for possession of drug paraphernalia. For the judge, the Zoom name was a much bigger crime.
What kind of idiot logs into court like that?
Saxton was promptly kicked out and returned later, and it turned out his sister was behind it all, and that he really had no idea what was happening. He ended up paying a $200 fine.
My sister was the one that set up my Zoom account or whatever.
Unlike Saxton, however, Tobias Roman chose his own dumb nickname.
What's your true correct name?
Tobias, my first name. That's it. Giggles or Tobias. That's it.
Tobias Roman was on trial for several felonies, including making threats. But Roman must have had a rough childhood, as he didn't like his name and preferred to be called Giggles in court. Whether it was because he looked hilarious or because he couldn't be taken seriously, Roman must have left his brain cells in the pocket of his extremely saggy pants, as he would not be quiet, ending up threatening a judge and being escorted outside. Maybe not the best thing to do when you're already in court for making threats, and worst of all, no one was giggling. At least Giggles knew when to stop when he was kicked out, unlike Ebony Banks, who just had to keep her mouth running. Banks was on trial for a domestic abuse charge, but it seems like the sentencing of not being able to get back to her grandfather's house really got on her nerves, as she kept arguing and arguing and arguing.
Leave.
So you gonna tell me I can't go home?
I'm telling you can't go home. If you live with
Whoa, I'm talking. I don't need you to say nothing.
If you live with Mr. McRae, you cannot return to that residence.
Oh, but how you just gonna tell me I can't go home?
What?
How you gonna tell me I can't go to my house?
For the judge, giving out 90 days of contempt in court was as easy as giving out candy. But Banks kept arguing and racking up her numbers all the way to 300 days in jail just for not keeping her mouth shut.
That's another 30 days. That's 60 days.
So what?
90 days.
So?
120 days.
Okay, and?
180 days.
No!
Thing. We'll talk in 6 months when you're ready to come back for your case.
Hey, at least now she has some place to stay in. Courtrooms rarely get this interesting, but every now and then you get an absolute madhouse, like the trial of Nicolaus Garrison. Garrison was on trial for meth charges, and unlike Walter White, this one was facing 6 months of prison time, until he decided it was too much and decided to risk his entire life instead, making a run for it outside the court with an officer on his tail. But unfortunately, it didn't end very well for the officer. Thankfully though, Garrison was caught again 3 days later, and he could forget about 6 months only now. Unlike Garrison, Michael Ray didn't make a run for it. He faced his extra charges head on. Ray was in court for criminal mischief and EPO, but when he found out his bond was set at $25,000, he loses it and chuckles. This prompted the judge to double his bond, but it only made things more heated from then on, as Ray threatened the judge to see her on the street and gave some pretty childish attitude in court, forcing the judge to force him in contempt for 100 days of jail time, and his charges skyrocketed to 10.
You think that's funny?
I think that's hilarious.
Your Honor, I think...
All right,
Excuse
so
me?
bond is $50,000. No bail credit. It's lucky I didn't hold him in contempt.
Hope I see him.
Bring him in. I'm
come
holding him
back
in
here.
contempt. Adding charges.
Contempt is no joke, but few seem to get that, just like Milton Watts. Watts had already missed his previous court dates, and he had a ton of excuses for it. But when the judge was literally doing his job as usual, Watts starts cussing out of nowhere.
You were supposed to be here last month. You did not appear. Why weren't you here?
I had work.
That's going to cost you 30 days in the county jail for contempt.
When the judge, who was cool as a cucumber, holds him in contempt with a full year of jail time, Watts suddenly has an existential crisis about his life and his job in McDonald's. Maybe when he gets out, he can upgrade to a Chick-fil-A.
You can either make life easy or you can make life hard. That's 60. You want to go for 90? That's 90 more.
Fuck it.
That's 180.
Fuck it!
That's 360.
Fucking, I'm working at McDonald's. Now I gotta fucking come here and fuck my life up. Fuck you!
Melvin, stop!
How many days you wanna give me now? Are you sir counting, bitch?
Melvin,
Yeah, I'm at about a year right now in contempt, so.
He's got mental problems. He's not on medical.
I don't care.
I don't give a fuck either.